Hey Schuylkill County Achieve Kids, so we're back for video number 2. Today we're going to do two things. I'll give you an update on the Potter's Farm kestrels, the smallest falcons of North America, and then I'm also going to show you how to use the Seek app. So this is a really fantastic app that you can download for free on your phone, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use this app and how you can start using it to explore and identifying plants and insects and birds in your own neighborhood. So in our first Achieve Summer Explorers video, at the end we climbed up a ladder and we looked inside that bird box there, that kestrel box. If you recall, kestrels are the smallest falcons in North America. And we got to see some babies when we opened up the side and looked. So let's remind ourselves what that looked like. Because kestrel populations are dropping in North America, like many bird species here, we teamed up with Hawk Mountain to be part of their kestrel nest box monitoring program. So once we found the baby chicks inside, we quick called their top researcher and he came over and gave a look to see how our new baby chicks were doing. Here's what they found.
Well, we're MJF from Hawk Mountain. We do have this project. We're monitoring kestrel nest boxes, and we're lucky to partner with a lot of farmers around here because kestrels actually are farmers' friends because they prey on rodents and insects and all those kind of things that the farmers wants to keep low. And so Leah here invited us because she has this kestrel box she's been having for several years, and it's been successful again this year. So we have four nice chicks, very healthy, and we just bend the chicks so we can track them and assess their health condition and reproductive success of the box. And if ever those chicks are found or reported or recovered somewhere, we're going to be able to tell where they're from and where they've been and how long they've survived. So this is part of a bigger project, but it's an important and critical part to be able to connect with local farmers around here.
Our little kestrels were all over the news, which is really a neat story for the farm, but it's also a wonderful way to get the word out on what's threatening these special birds and many other birds that are common to our backyards, and getting the word out on what we can do about it. We'll talk about how habitat loss is one of the greatest threats to not only these little falcons here in Schuylkill County, but all types of different bird species in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, the United States, and all over the world.
Schuylkill County Farm has some new company on its property. Today, Hawk Mountain helped the family farm welcome some fine feathered friends to the area. Eyewitness News reporter Rachel Espaillat explains.
Della Dronchak looked down in admiration at the baby kestrel in her hands, hatched at Potter Farm in Pine Grove.
It was really tiny, but it was also really cute.
She held the little falcon as the staff from Hawk Mountain banded the other three.
And once you let a kid hold a kestrel in their hand and just experience that kind of nature, they're going to care about conserving and protecting that bird for the rest of their lives.
Leah Zerbe installed the kestrel nesting box on her farm. The sanctuary gave it to her to replace the one her family installed 25 years ago.
And we know that they're having babies, but I never actually got to look in the box and to see the babies before they fledged, so it was really exciting.
Dr. J.F. Theron climbed up to retrieve the little falcons from the nesting box. He measured their wings,
Tail length,
and weight before banding them with a colored and numbered ring on their legs. I have a girl and a boy in my hand. You can tell because the boy has blue in his feathers. Dr. Theron says that the kestrel population has been steadily declining since the 80s, but with the help of farmers like Zerbe, Hawk Mountain is trying to increase the population with its kestrel box program.
She's a local farm, organic farmer, having a meadow that a kestrel prey on, and she's providing a kestrel box. So it's a perfect combination for a successful pair.
A perfect combination welcoming new life and new feathered friends. In Pine Grove, Rachel Espaillat, Eyewitness News.
Those baby kestrels are adorable. Hawk Mountain has been monitoring the population of this bird for the last 50 years.
And now some fast kestrel facts. A kestrel most commonly feasts on insects for dinner, but they also prey on small rodents like voles and mice. They also eat snakes, frogs, and they love spiders, moths, butterflies, cicadas, dragonflies. These are all things that they like to eat and that they rely on to survive. But kestrels themselves sometimes turn into meals for larger raptors like Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks. The oldest American kestrel was a male and at least 14 years old when he passed away and was found in Utah in 2001. He had been banded in the same state in 1987. Kestrels require open meadows and farmlands to hunt, but overdevelopment has become a major problem. And we exacerbate that problem when we buy stuff that we really don't need, because creating that causes all sorts of pollution that are bad for the birds and us. Not only that, it also requires trucking all of that stuff to us, which means that we need to build more distribution centers on areas that once featured sprawling farmland. And it's not just kestrels that are in trouble. Over the past 50 years, North America has lost more than 25% of its entire bird population, or around 300 billion birds. One major culprit, chemical agriculture. We know spraying pesticides on farm crops harms birds and people, but it's the seeds that harm the birds too. A single seed treated with neonicotinoid insecticides, also known as neonics, is enough to kill a songbird. Lesser amounts can emaciate the birds, impair their reproduction, and disrupt their migratory pathways so they can't remember where they're going. But there's so much you can do to help. By growing some of your own food organically and choosing organic as often as you can, you'll help get pesticides and insecticides out of our farm fields and out of our birds' bodies. Also, buy less stuff. The more stuff we buy, the more warehouses, trucks, and air pollution that occurs, hurting not just the birds but ourselves. And science already shows that kids are happiest when they focus on being outside, not when they get more stuff. Consider leaving a small or large unmowed patch in your yard or around your school or local park. And learn to ID and plant more native plants. These plants are meant to be in our local ecosystem, and they create natural bird food, support, and balance in all of our lives. Okay, so here's how it goes. Once you download the Seek app on your phone, you can go in and enter, and you'll be able to start seeing if you can use this app to identify different trees, flowers, shrubs, birds, spiders, weeds, all sorts of things in your neighborhood. There is one thing I want to note though, it doesn't always get it 100% right. It often gets it very close. So you never want to use this as a tool to identify something that you can eat. You would always want to cross-check and make sure you're with somebody who really knows their stuff in that department before you would eat anything that you identified. So just a little caution there. But let's take a look and see how we could identify something with the Seek app. So we'll come down into my backyard. This is a part of the farm that's become really swampy because with climate change, we're now getting a lot more rain faster in Pennsylvania. So we're starting to grow more plants down here that do well in the swampy conditions. So let's see if we can identify one using the Seek app. As it rains here, water kind of flows down here and often will sit down here. So it's actually starting to become a wetland down here. So let's see some of the things that are native plants that grow in Pennsylvania that do well in a wetland. Let's see if we can use our Seek app to identify. So if you look down here, you can see that we actually have sitting water here. So it's been a few days since a big rain, but there's still some water sitting here. So this is definitely in the process of becoming a wetland. So let's see if we can pull up the sea gap and identify something that likes to grow here and sit in water. So it's kind of tracking in through the taxonomy. And there we go. Once all of the buttons are lined up, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you see that this was able to identify it all the way as a marsh marigold. Then you click the button, it saves, and you'll get some new information about what you identified, which is really neat. And this is how I started learning a lot about what was growing around me. What's also cool is you can see it kind of geotags where you found it. So when scientists are wondering what species are growing where, they'll actually tap into the data here on the CCAP. So you're doing something called citizen science. You're not just learning for yourself, but you're also collecting data for scientists who can't be everywhere all of the time. So ready to become a citizen scientist in your own backyard? Let's go.
Taxonomy. It's the science of classifying living things. That sounds exciting. Today, we'll basically be learning the Dewey Decimal System of evolution. It's like filing. You must be on the edge of your seat. Every living thing on this planet is related to every other living thing. If you go far enough back, we all have a common ancestor, an organism that both you and I are descended from, or something that a starfish and a blue whale are both descended from, or even weirder, that an oak tree and a salmon are both descended from. That organism lived. It lived very long ago, but it was here. And I dig that. The trick of taxonomy is basically figuring out where all those branches of the evolutionary tree are and finding some convenient labels to help us understand all of these remarkable interrelationships. Let's be clear though, taxonomy isn't about describing life in all of its ridiculous detail. It's mostly about helping humans understand it because it's way too complicated without structure. To get that structure, biologists use the taxonomic system to classify all the organisms on the Earth. It's sometimes called the phylogenetic tree, or the tree of life, and it illustrates the evolutionary relationships between all living species. So there are about 2 million known species, but there could be anywhere from 5 million to 100 million species. New species keep getting discovered all the time, and the more organisms we have to keep track of, the more complex the phylogenetic tree becomes. So there's not always a consensus about how to classify this stuff. There's a lot of gray area in the natural world. Actually, let me rephrase that. The natural world is one giant gray area. Sometimes it's just hard to know where to put a certain group of organisms, and eventually the group gets so big the classification system has to be messed with to make room for it. So the system isn't perfect, but it's good enough that we've been using it for around 250 years. What's that? Do you smell a biography coming on? Carl Linnaeus was a Swede, born in 1707, and early in his career as a botanist, he realized that the botanical nomenclature of 18th century Europe was, well, just crap. For instance, in his day, the formal name of a tomato plant was Solanum caule inerme herbaceofolus pinnatus incisus racemus simplicibus. Linnaeus actually said, "Once I shudder at the sight of most botanical names given by modern authorities." Not only did the sloppiness bother him, he saw a whole sugar storm blowing in, because new plants were still being discovered in Europe. But that was nothing compared to the crazy stuff that was coming from the New World. Linnaeus saw that pretty soon naming conventions were just going to collapse under all these new things to name, and then what? So Linnaeus famously started off by naming himself. He came from a peasant family, and at that time surnames were just for rich people. So when Carl went to college, they asked him for his surname, and he just made one up, Linnaeus, after the linden trees that grew on his family's homestead. Linnaeus got a medical degree and became a professor at Uppsala University, where he devoted himself to the study of nomenclature. He had his students go to places and bring back specimens for him to study and categorize. The method he eventually adopted was based on morphology, or physical form and and structure. This wasn't necessarily a new idea. Back then, people grouped organisms by analogous or homoplastic traits, structures that appear similar but actually come from completely independent origins. By this definition, birds would be more closely related to butterflies than to reptiles because both birds and butterflies can fly. But Linnaeus had a good mind for this stuff and turned out to have a real knack for choosing actual homologous traits for his classification system, traits that stem from a common evolutionary ancestor. Linnaeus cataloged roughly 7,700 plants and 4,400 animals. He published his classifications in a catalog called Systema Naturae, which by the time he wrote its 12th edition was 2,300 pages long. In the meantime, Linnaeus actually adopted a personal motto: God created, Linnaeus organized. Although taxonomy has come a long way since Linnaeus, we still use a bunch of the conventions that he invented. For instance, we still arrange things into taxa, or groups of organisms, and we still use the same taxa as Linnaeus: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. We also still use Linnaeus's convention of binomial nomenclature, using a unique two-part name for every species, the genus and its species name, in Latin or sort of Latin-ish. This practice actually started back in the Middle Ages when educated people were expected to know Latin. We know a lot less Latin now, but we know a lot more about evolution, which Linnaeus didn't. And we have technologies like genetic testing to classify relationships between organisms, and yet we still use Linnaeus's morphology-based system because genetic evidence generally agrees with classifications that are made based on structure and form. However, because there was a lot of life that Linnaeus had no idea about, we had to stick a new taxa above Linnaeus's kingdom. We call it domain. Evolutionarily, there are actual categories. Each of these kingdoms is a huge branch in the tree of life. At each branch, an evolutionary change occurred that was so massively helpful that it spawned a vast diversity of descendants. Plants, or plantae, are the autotrophs of the domain Eukarya. Autotrophs meaning that they can feed themselves through photosynthesis, of course. They're cellulose-based cell walls and chloroplasts, giving them a distinct difference from all other multicellular life. There are two other sorts of trophs. There's the heterotrophs, which get their energy by eating other organisms, and the chemotrophs, which are weird and crazy and only show up in bacteria and archaea, and they get their energy from chemicals. Now, the kingdom Protista is weird because it contains both autotrophs and heterotrophs. Some protists can photosynthesize while others eat living things. Protists are basically a bunch of weird eukaryotic single-celled organisms that may or may not be evolutionarily related to each other. Scientists are still trying to figure it out. Some are plant-like, like algae, some are more animal-like, like amoebas, and some are fungus-like, like slime molds. Protists are one of those gray areas I was telling you about, so don't be surprised if by the time you're teaching this to your biology students, there are more than 4 kingdoms in Eukarya. Fungi, which are, you know, the funguses. They include mushrooms and smuts and puffballs and truffles and molds and yeasts. And they're pretty cool because they have cell walls like plants, but instead of being made of cellulose, they're made of another carbohydrate called chitin, which is also what the beak of a giant squid is made of, or the exoskeleton of a beetle. Because fungi are heterotrophs, like animals, they have these sort of digestive enzymes that break down their food and get reabsorbed. But they can't move, so they don't require a stomach for digestion. They just grow on top of whatever it is they're digesting, and digest it right where it is, which is super convenient. And finally, we have Kingdom Animalia, which is the lovely kingdom that we find ourselves and 100% of adorable organisms in. Animals are multicellular, always. We are heterotrophic, so we spend a lot of time hunting down food because we can't make it ourselves. And almost all of us can move, at least during some stage of our life cycle. And most of us develop either 2 or 3 germ layers during embryonic development. Wait for it. Unless you're a sponge. So like I said, we use this taxonomic system to describe the common ancestry and evolutionary history of an organism. Looking at the phylogenetic tree, you can tell that humans are more closely related to mice than we are to fish, and more closely related to fish than we are to fruit flies. So how about we pick an organism and we follow it all the way through the taxa, from kingdom to species, just to see how it works.
I know. Let's pick this kitty, because I know she'd like it. Right, cat?
So kitties have cells that have nuclei and membrane-surrounded organelles, and they're multicellular and heterotrophic and have 3 germ layers of cells when they're embryos, so they're in the kingdom Animalia. And they have a spinal cord running down their backs protected by vertebra and discs in between them, and they have a tail that doesn't have a butthole at the end of it like a worm, which I'm really glad about.
And that puts her in the phylum Chordata. Kitty clearly does not like this, so I'm going to put her down now.
And the kitty lactates. It gives birth to young like a cow instead of laying eggs like a chicken. And they have fur and 3 special tiny bones in their ears that only mammals have. So they're in the class Mammalia. So she's more closely related to cow than to chicken. Good to know. And like a bunch of other placental mammals that eat meat like weasels, the mustelids, and dogs, the canines, kitties are in the order Carnivora. And they're in the cat family, Felidae, whose members have lithe bodies and roundish heads, and except for cheetahs, retractable claws. And they're littler than tigers and panthers, which puts them in the genus Felis. And then at the level of the species, the descriptions get pretty dang detailed. So let's just say that you know what a cat is. So the species name is Catus. And look at that! Felis catus.
No, Kitty, I could have that whole thing cross-stitched onto a pillow for you to sleep on. It would be cute.
Thank you for watching our taxidermy taxonomy episode of Crash Course Biology. We hope that you learned something. Thanks to everybody who helped put this episode together. If you have any questions for us, please leave them on Facebook or Twitter in the comments below, and we will get to them hopefully very quickly. We'll see you next time.
Does all of that leave you feeling like your head's spinning? If so, don't worry. I just wanted you to see that when you're using your Seek app, sometimes the app won't be able to identify what you're looking at down to the exact species, but it can help you understand the tree of life and help get you closer to the identification. So are we ready to go out and explore? We'll find some plants that are good for not only pollinators and things that are commonly found in yards, but things that people have even used for their own human health over the years and centuries. So let's see what we have here. This is common in many yards. Okay, so we have American plantain, also known as black-seeded plantain. It's a native plant, but it's often called a weed. It grows in many people's yards in Pennsylvania, but it is beneficial for many insects and us. Black-seeded or American plantain is the larval host plant for caterpillars of the buckeye butterfly and many other moths. Northern cardinals and grasshopper sparrows like to eat the seeds, and the leaves are also a healthy, tasty treat for deer and rabbits. And when the seeds drop from the plant, they can live in the ground for years before sprouting. But American plantain is good for humans, too. Plantain seeds help create a healthier gut. So if you're having trouble or constipated, it can help act like a natural laxative, and it can also help soothe an irritated gut. And you can also chew on the fresh leaves and then apply them to minor burns and inflammation. In fact, medicinally, Native Americans used plantain leaves to relieve the pain of bee stings and insect bites, and to help stop the itching of poison ivy and other allergic rashes, and to help heal sores and bruises. You can also create plantain tea that can be used as a mouthwash to help heal any sores in the mouth. But most recently, plantain is even being investigated as something that can help folks stop smoking. So it's one of the many ways that this herb is very useful and versatile. Ooh, and here's another one. Let's see if the Seek app can identify this helpful plant. Let's see, it's looking at class right now. Can it get closer? Can it get to the species? Yes, okay, so here we have a native elderberry. So elderberries are one of the most popular medicinal plants in America. We've been using them back since the time of the Native Americans, but we're starting to know now during cold and flu season that elderberry is something great to reach for. I actually got to help work on this book when I worked at Rodale, helped with editing and promoting this book. So I'm going to read you some tips from this book about how to use elderberry. So it says, elderberry flowers are valued as a remedy for colds and fever, and they have been for centuries. Fruit extracts have been shown to have significant antiviral activity, especially against the flu. And you can even make a tea. You can pour 1 cup of boiling water over 1 to 2 teaspoons of elderberry flowers, and you let it sit and steep for about 10 minutes. And then if you want, you can even sweeten it with a little bit of honey. And that's just a really basic way that you can help boost your own immune system. We know more than ever that it's important to eat well and keep our bodies nice and healthy and strong. So if sickness comes along, we're as strong as we can be and able to fight it. And elderberry is one of those go-to medicinal herbs that people have been turning to for centuries and centuries. And it looks like we have time for maybe one more. So here the Seek app identified common yarrow. This is found pretty much all over Pennsylvania, and it's really an important medicinal herb. I'm going to read from you again from Rodale's 21st Century Herbal, the book that I help work on as an editor, and just let you know a little bit about this plant. At one time, yarrow was used as a substitute for hops in brewing beer. But today you can use small amounts of yarrow leaves to flavor soups and salads and egg dishes. Yarrow is also really loved in herbal medicine because it has anti-inflammatory effects. Some other uses for this plant includes using it as an herbal band-aid. So Native Americans know that yarrow is really great at healing the skin. And they recognized this early on, and they made an infusion of the whole plant to treat fevers and colds, and they also applied the leaves to the skin to heal boils, open sores, swelling, burns, cuts, sprains, and other skin issues. So the next time you're wandering through a field and happen to cut yourself, you may want to try grinding up a few yarrow leaves, applying them to your wound, and you'll be doing just as people have done for hundreds of years. But always with anything, be careful. Make sure that you're using yarrow, and if you are allergic to plants in this family, the carrot family, or if your skin is really sensitive to the sun, you may want to skip this. But it's really fun to not only learn about native plants, but also all of these other plants that are growing in our backyards, and together how they help the whole entire ecosystem, and how some of them have been helping human health for centuries and centuries. So just something for us to continue to talk about and look into: native plants, medicinal plants, and just using the space in our schools, in our yards, to really help harness environmental health and human health, because as we said before, we know that it's all related. Hope to talk to you soon. So it's another sunset here on Potter's Farm approaching, and I just wanted to thank you for joining me again for talking about an update on our kestrel babies, and talking about how we can use technology out there, how we can use the Seek app to identify native plants and healing plants that may be growing in our own backyards and we don't even know it. So I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person soon, coming to the school, and maybe even helping build monarch way stations, native plant gardens, and medicinal herb and plant gardens right here on your school grounds. So hope to see you in person soon, but until then, I'll see you on Zoom for our next call.